The moment my rich aunt looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't getting a single dollar from her will, I felt like the floor disappeared beneath my feet. What made it worse wasn't the money itself. It was the reason she gave. She said I had never been there for the family, and that I didn't deserve anything she had spent her entire life building. Meanwhile, the relatives who barely visited her, who only showed up during holidays to take photos and brag about being connected to her wealth, were all included. I sat there in complete shock while everyone else around the dining room table tried to hide their smirks. Some of them didn't even bother hiding it. They looked genuinely pleased that I had been singled out and humiliated. The crazy part, I had spent years helping my aunt whenever she needed it. So tell me honestly, if someone publicly cut you out of their will after everything you had done for them, would you just walk away? Or would you want answers? Because what happened next changed everything. To understand why this hurt so much, I need to explain my family. My Aunt Patricia wasn't just rich. She was wealthy in the kind of way people whispered about. She owned several commercial properties, had investments everywhere, and lived in a massive estate outside the city. She never married and never had children, which meant everyone in the family quietly assumed her fortune would eventually be divided among her nieces and nephews. Growing up, I actually admired her. She was intelligent, successful, and seemed to know how to command respect the second she walked into a room. When I was younger, she often told me I was her favorite because I wasn't obsessed with money like some of my cousins. At least that's what she used to say. The rest of the family treated Aunt Patricia differently. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering, people practically competed for her attention. My cousin Brian would bring expensive gifts he couldn't afford. My cousin Amanda constantly complimented everything she owned. My uncle Robert agreed with every opinion she ever had, even when she contradicted herself 5 minutes later. I hated watching it. I always felt relationships should be genuine, so while everyone else played their little games, I simply treated her like family. Years passed and my life wasn't exactly glamorous. I worked a regular office job, rented a modest apartment, and lived paycheck to paycheck more often than I'd like to admit. Meanwhile, Aunt Patricia's wealth continued growing. Despite our different lifestyles, we remained close. Whenever she needed help with technology, I was there. Whenever she needed someone to drive her to appointments, I was there. Whenever she felt lonely and wanted someone to talk to, I was there. Not because I expected anything. Because she was my aunt. At least that's what I thought. Everything started changing after she turned 78. Suddenly, relatives who hadn't called her in years began visiting weekly. Brian showed up with flowers. Amanda started organizing family dinners. Uncle Robert became her unofficial advisor. It felt strange. Almost like everyone knew something I didn't. One afternoon, while helping my aunt organize old paperwork, I casually mentioned how nice it was that everyone seemed interested in spending time with her lately. She laughed. Not a happy laugh. A bitter one. "They're not here for me," she said. "They're here for what happens after I'm gone." I remember telling her she was probably being too cynical. Looking back, maybe I was the naive one. A few months later, she announced a family gathering at her estate. Everyone came. The atmosphere felt different from the start. Tense. Anticipatory. Like people were waiting for a major announcement. Then she stood up and delivered it. She had finalized her will. The room immediately became silent. I still remember every detail. The crystal glasses. The expensive chandelier. The smug smiles. Then she began explaining who would receive what. Properties. Investment accounts. Cash distributions. Family heirlooms. Everyone received something. Everyone except me. When she finally reached my name, she simply said, "And to my nephew nothing." The room froze. I thought I had misheard her. Then she looked directly at me. "You've chosen your own path in life. I believe you'll do fine without my help." That was it. No explanation. No discussion. Nothing. Humiliation washed over me. I felt every eye in the room staring. Some looked shocked. Others looked satisfied. I quietly stood up and left. Nobody followed me. Nobody stopped me. The drive home felt endless. Part of me wanted to call her. Part of me wanted to demand answers. But another part of me was simply exhausted. For weeks I avoided family gatherings. I stopped answering calls. I focused on work and tried convincing myself it didn't matter. After all, it wasn't my money. She could do whatever she wanted with it. Still, the betrayal lingered. Then things got even stranger. One evening, an attorney contacted me. He introduced himself as my aunt's lawyer and asked if we could meet privately. I assumed it had something to do with paperwork or maybe some legal issue. What he told me completely changed my understanding of everything. According to him, my aunt had instructed him to give me a sealed envelope exactly 6 months after that family gathering. No sooner. No later. I was stunned. He handed me the envelope and left. For several minutes I just stared at it. My hands were shaking. Eventually I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. As I read the first paragraph, my heart nearly stopped. My aunt confessed that the public will wasn't her real plan. She explained that over the past several years, she had become increasingly concerned about the greed she saw in our family. She suspected certain relatives cared more about her money than about her. But she needed proof. So she created a test. The will announcement had been part of that test. And I was part of it without even knowing. According to the letter, she intentionally removed me because she believed I was the only family member who genuinely cared about her rather than her wealth. She knew losing my inheritance would hurt. She knew I would feel betrayed. But she wanted to see how everyone reacted afterward. Would I attack her? Would I demand money? Would I manipulate her? Or would I continue living my life? The letter explained everything. And honestly, I didn't know whether to feel relieved or furious. Then I reached the final pages. That's when everything changed. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Imagine being publicly humiliated by someone you trusted. Imagine spending months believing they had abandoned you. Then discovering it had all been part of a secret test. Would you forgive them? Would you walk away? Or would you hear them out? Pause for a second and think about what you would do, because I genuinely wasn't sure myself. The final pages revealed the truth. My aunt had created a second will. A completely separate estate plan. One that nobody in the family knew existed. The public version everyone celebrated over wasn't the real one. The actual inheritance would only be revealed after certain conditions were met. Over the following months, my aunt documented how family members behaved. And according to her letter, what she discovered horrified her. Brian secretly argued over property that technically wasn't even his yet. Amanda attempted to pressure her into changing asset distributions. Uncle Robert repeatedly asked for access to financial information. Other relatives began fighting among themselves over possessions they assumed they would inherit. Some even stopped visiting entirely after believing their share was secure. Meanwhile, I had disappeared. Not out of anger. Out of disappointment. And apparently that mattered. The letter ended with one final instruction. She wanted me to meet her lawyer again. The following week I did exactly that. When I arrived, he placed several documents on the table. Then he explained the situation. My aunt had recently passed away. I didn't even know. Hearing those words hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, I loved her. I sat there in silence as grief mixed with confusion. Then the lawyer slid the documents toward me. The second will named me as the primary beneficiary of nearly her entire estate. I thought it was a mistake. There had to be some misunderstanding. But there wasn't. She had left me almost everything. Not because I was her favorite. Not because she wanted revenge against the family. Because she believed I was the only person who hadn't treated her like a lottery ticket. The fallout was immediate. When the family learned about the second will, chaos erupted. Brian accused me of manipulation. Amanda claimed I had somehow pressured Aunt Patricia behind the scenes. Uncle Robert threatened legal action. Phone calls flooded in. Text messages exploded. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. Some demanded explanations. Others demanded money. One cousin actually told me it was my moral obligation to divide the inheritance equally. That conversation lasted less than 30 seconds before I hung up. The legal challenges dragged on for months. Every accusation imaginable surfaced. People claimed the will was forged. People claimed my aunt wasn't mentally competent. People claimed I had influenced her decisions. Every claim failed. The evidence was overwhelming. Her lawyers had documented everything meticulously. Eventually, the courts upheld her wishes. The estate became mine. What surprised me most wasn't the money. It was what the experience revealed. People I had known my entire life showed sides of themselves I never imagined existed. Relationships collapsed. Masks came off. The greed my aunt feared became impossible to ignore. For a while I considered walking away from all of it, taking my share and disappearing. But then I remembered something she once told me years earlier. She said wealth doesn't reveal character. It amplifies it. And suddenly everything made sense. The inheritance wasn't the lesson. The reactions were. I used part of the money to pay off debts. I bought a home. I invested carefully. But I also established scholarship funds in my aunt's name. I donated to causes she cared about. I tried honoring the person she was before family politics and greed consumed everything. As for the relatives, most eventually disappeared. A few apologized. Some never did. The relationships were never fully repaired. And honestly, I don't think they ever will be. The strange thing is that I don't hate them. I just see them differently now. Sometimes people spend years pretending to be someone they're not. Then one unexpected event exposes everything. In our family, that event was a will. And in the end, my aunt got exactly what she wanted. She learned who truly cared about her. The irony is that when she first cut me out of her will, I thought she had destroyed our relationship forever. Instead, she left me with one final lesson I'll never forget. Money comes and goes. Property comes and goes. But character eventually reveals itself, no matter how hard people try to hide it. Looking back now, I wish things hadn't happened the way they did. I wish she had trusted me enough to tell me the truth from the beginning, but I also understand why she made the choices she did. Her final gift wasn't the inheritance, it was clarity. She showed me exactly who the people around me really were. If you were on my side in this story, make sure to like this video. Subscribe for more stories like this and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Would you have forgiven my aunt? Would you have handled the inheritance differently? Let me know below because I'm genuinely curious what you think. Thanks for listening to my story, and I'll see you all in the next story.